Melissa, welcome to the podcast. Thank you so much for being here today.
Sure, Leanne, thank you so much for having me.
Yes, I am so excited. You guys have no idea how long I've been waiting to record this episode. This has been months in the making, but this is a very special episode that is sponsored by the National Domestic Violence Hotline. We have an advocate here who works for the hotline, and we're going to get a behind the scenes look of what happens when someone calls the hotline and decides to make that brave decision to ask for help. So I just want to say thank you so much to the hotline. Thank you so much for Melissa to agreeing to come on. I would love for you to introduce yourself for people who are meeting you for the first time, a little bit of who you are and what you do.
My name is Melissa Dolak-Keller. I have been at the National Domestic Violence Hotline for over 8 years now, and I work full-time as a digital advocate. So what I do is I'm on the lines answering people who reach out to us via chat through our web messaging or via text.
Yes, absolutely. And, this is something that I think a lot of people, we hear about the National Domestic Violence Hotline. We know the number, we know it's a resource that is available, but I don't really think people, if you haven't made that decision to contact the hotline, like what that really looks like. And that's what I really want this episode to be focused on. But before we get into the meat and potatoes of what it is that you do and what the hotline can provide for anyone who's looking for those resources and that help, I always like to get a little backstory on every guest that I have that comes on my podcast, especially when it comes to domestic violence. This is a very taboo subject. This is something that it's very much hush hush. It's shamed in a sense. It's hidden behind closed doors. And for us to be in these spaces to really put it in people's faces, I know there's a story behind why we're doing the work that we're doing. So I would love for you to talk a little bit about what inspired you to get involved in working with the hotline and what was your own experience with domestic violence in your life.
Yeah, for sure. I do want to clarify, like all of our advocates have a story. So everyone comes into this work with some attachment to it in some form. My story is a slight bit different in that I was not in an abusive relationship. I have had relationships that definitely were not healthy. But what led me to this work is that back when I was in college, I was the victim of a pretty brutal sexual crime that involved multiple perpetrators. And I was in a situation where I did end up going to the police by accident, actually. And I spent the next 2 years in the court system, like in the legal process, dealing with all of that. I was 18, 19, 20 years old. I was alone. Like you said, there's a lot of shame around these kinds of things. So I didn't tell my family. There's family I have today that still don't know. I didn't tell a lot of my friends. I was ostracized by a lot of people that did know. So plus being away in college, like it just like that perfect storm of things. And I didn't really have anyone. The detective that I work with was really amazing. I did have a counselor at the time and she was phenomenal, but these are not people who can be with you, every second of every.
24/7.
Yeah. Right. So I was left to navigate a lot of this on my own, a lot of the court stuff, meeting with the prosecutors, the special investigator. I did all that on my own. I had to go to a grand jury twice by myself. So it was a really, really tough time. And immediately after it all was happening, I talked to my counselor and I said, look, I want to help other people. I want to do something. And she was like, you're not, like, you're fresh out of it. Like, you're still in it. It's not your time. Like, you're not ready. And she told me that for a long time. And I was like, okay, I'm not ready. And I waited for a number of years. And then I volunteered with the local rape crisis center in my county in New Jersey and went through their training and was essentially an on-call volunteer advocate for them, assisting people who needed SANE exams, going to hospitals, or just talking with them on the phone about like what they were experiencing and what their next steps should be. The way that life is, I ended up away from this work for a long time, as you do when you need a job to, pay your rent and make the
Right.
car payment. And I was in a position 10 years ago, actually, where I knew I was being laid off from my job in the private sector. I was in the private sector for a long time. And I was able to take a step back and really ask myself, what do I want to do? Like, what does the rest of my life look like? What kind of work do I want to be involved with? And I sat down and I was like, what would I do for free? What would I do that is rewarding that I wouldn't even feel like I'd need to be paid for? And this was the answer to that. I ended up moving halfway across the country, ended up in Austin, Texas, and volunteered with our local domestic violence shelter. So I was a volunteer advocate on their hotline on the phone, but also involved in their essentially the community education program. So tabling like at the university here or at different events, explaining the services that are offered by our local shelter. And fortuitously, the position at the National Domestic Violence Hotline opened up and I got the job. And so I've essentially been here ever since because to me, it wasn't specifically, oh, I only want to help survivors of sexual violence, but it's all these all forms of violence against anyone. It's not even just women, these forms of violence that people perpetrate against their partners. It's just so pervasive. And we need people who want to help and that can help. I've talked to a lot of survivors. They don't feel comfortable. They don't feel safe. They don't feel not necessarily strong enough, but they don't feel like they have the support system they can reach out to and tell their story, much less publicly. So I am of the opinion that for myself, I can tell my story and I should because there aren't enough voices out there bringing light, like you said at the beginning, bringing light to these things that are going on behind closed doors, in the shadows, to people that you would never expect it to happen to. That's my goal. And that's been my goal. And that continues to be my goal is to essentially bring a voice to the violence that happens to people so that others feel comfortable, if not speaking out, then at least reaching out to someone close to them, to a hotline, to a shelter, whatever that looks like for them in their own journal.
Yeah, exactly. Just taking that first step. And I appreciate you so much for sharing a little bit about your story because regardless of what your journey looks like, whether you're in the beginning, whether you're still in it, whether you're on the other side and now thriving, as I like to say, there's always a starting point and there's always a reason as to why we're doing what we're doing. And same for me. This is why I started this podcast. This is why I decided after surviving what I went through in my own abusive relationship that almost took my life during the pandemic, I found my purpose in my pain. And that's really what this platform is all about. That's why it's called Watch Us Thrive. Of course, we need to talk about the painful things that we've gone through, but what are you going to do with that pain? How are you going to turn that into your purpose? And that's what this platform is really about. And especially when it comes to domestic violence, I mean, me and you, we know the numbers and the statistics and how often this is happening, not just in the United States, but globally. This is an epidemic that it's affecting so many people. And yet to this day, it's still such a hush hush and taboo topic. And how do we create that change? We have to talk about it. We have to make people uncomfortable with the truth. This is the reality of what is happening day in and day out. And that's why we need to continue having these types of conversations to remind you, hey, it's not just happening in October. This is 24/7, 365.
It really is.
Anyway, rant over. Let's get into the meat and potatoes of this episode. So I want you to start off with what kind of support does the National Domestic Violence Hotline offer to callers? And how do you tailor that support to help each individual who does call in or chat in or however they reach out to the hotline?
Yeah, for sure. So we're one of the largest service providers in the United States for survivors of relationship abuse and intimate partner violence. So what this does is this gives us a very unique real-time pulse on the challenges that survivors are facing with their partners that are choosing to cause them harm. We are available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. We are not off for holidays. But essentially, we're not off for holidays. We're here all the time, constantly. There's somebody here. I don't care if it's 2 a.m. on Christmas Eve. Somebody is going to be here. Midnight on New Year's Eve, New Year's Day, somebody is going to be here when you need them. And we provide what we feel are very essential tools and support to help survivors of domestic violence so they can live their lives free from abuse. Like you said about the numbers, we recently hit our 7 millionth contact. I believe it was in June of this year. And we've been in operation for 26 years now, I believe. So every year we're serving hundreds of thousands of contacts. And like you said, it's not just in October. This is something that goes on year round. So we have advocates on the lines that are highly trained experts. They go through a month-long, very intense training. And what we provide is a free, confidential, and compassionate support system for someone to reach out to. We don't ever charge for any of our services. You're never going to get like a bill from us for anything. This is all free and confidential. We do crisis intervention, education, and then we also refer out to local services in someone's area. So how we do that is essentially we meet every survivor, every contact where they're at. So we ask questions so that we have some kind of an understanding about like what their experience is. We assess for the different kinds of abuse that might be going on and any dangers they may be facing, because as we know, there are certain factors that can make a situation a lot more dangerous. So those are things that we try to hear from our contacts so that we know, so we can kind of assess their danger level. And then we connect them to the resources that best meet their specific needs. So not everybody needs a legal advocate, and that's fine. Not everybody wants to go to counseling. Not everybody needs to go to shelter. So it's based on like what they're experiencing and what they're needing is what we're going to provide to them. And we've been taking all this information and putting it in their hands. We're never going to tell someone what to do. We're never going to advise them how to act. We are here to listen, provide the information, and let them decide how to best move forward in a way that fits their life.
Yeah. Okay. So if you could give me like a example of what they would expect when they either make the call or when they decide to reach out online, if you could give like a step-by-step process of what actually happens when someone decides to reach out to the hotline. This episode of the Watch Us Thrive podcast is proudly sponsored by the National Domestic Violence Hotline. Did you know that intimate partner violence alone affects more than 12 million people per year, and nearly 1 in 4 women and 1 in 7 men aged 18 and older in the United States have been a victim of severe physical violence by an intimate partner in their lifetime? Domestic violence affects millions of people every year, regardless of your age, your gender, or your background. And for survivors, finding support can be a lifeline. That's why 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, the National Domestic Violence Hotline provides essential tools and support to help survivors of domestic violence live a life free of abuse. When you reach out to the National Domestic Violence Hotline, you can expect to connect with highly trained expert advocates who offer free, confidential, and compassionate support in over 200 languages. These advocates are equipped with the knowledge and skills needed for crisis intervention, safety planning, and providing valuable resources and referrals. And not just for survivors, but for their loved ones as well. If you or someone that you know is in need of help, don't wait. You can contact the National Domestic Violence Hotline by visiting www.thehotline.org, by calling 1-800-799-7233, or by texting the word START, that's START, to 88788. Help is available anytime, day or night. Thank you again to the National Domestic Violence Hotline for sponsoring this podcast episode.
Yeah. So whether someone calls, whether they text, or whether they chat, I do want to say this. They are initially greeted by a bot. We do have a bot at the very, very, very beginning that just collects very basic demographic information. And that's the only reason that we have the bot. So on the phone side, after the bot collects the information, you'll be put in the queue, and then an advocate, a live human person, will answer the phone. And the same goes for chat and text. You'll get a notification that says, hey, you've been connected with an advocate. That advocate is a real person. I just want to emphasize that because like I said, I work in digital. So I do get questions like, hey, are you an AI? Are you a robot? I want to assure everyone out there, we are definitely real people that are here listening and supporting you. Nothing outside the initial demographics is done by a robot.
I just wanted to ask, is the information that they give, is that recorded and saved into your database?
So we do say, like I said, very generic demographic information.
Okay.
We save that information not in like our like resource database. It's not for the public at all. It's something that we kind of compile in a very general way so that we can take the information essentially to Congress a lot of the time and say, hey, these are the statistics of the people that are reaching out to us. This is what we're seeing. This is who we're hearing from, so that we can push for things like legislation that are important. And it's also used for like our grant process too, so that we can show like who we're hearing from and what's going on. I do want to say that information is optional. If you don't feel comfortable telling us your age, that's totally fine. If you don't want to tell us your city and state, that's not an issue. No one is under any obligation to provide that information to us. You can just be like, nope, for all the questions, and we'll still talk to you. That's not a precursor to being connected with someone at all. I do want to say on the digital side, though, because of federal law, we cannot chat or text with anyone who indicates they are under the age of 13. We do not have that same stipulation on the phone lines. So if someone is 12, 11, 10, younger, we can't chat with them online, but they can call and we can talk with them on the phones. So for the younger contacts out there, you can reach out by phone. Once someone is connected to an advocate, that person is there to listen. And essentially, that's what we start by doing. So like for me, my first question is, I'm glad you're safe. Like, how can I help you? People don't always have an answer to that question, but it just opens that door for what has kind of prompted you to reach out, what is concerning you, what are you having thoughts about, or just people who are just like, oh, I need XYZ resources. That's great. Just so I can kind of gauge where you're at and what you're needing. For a lot of people, this is the first time speaking about their experience. They are isolated in their relationship, which is intentional. So they don't have necessarily contact with friends or family that they can reach out to. They don't feel comfortable talking to a counselor or a therapist necessarily about what's going on for a myriad of reasons, of course. Or they might have told someone that didn't respond in a very survivor-centered way and may have been dismissive of their experience or just outright didn't believe them. So that makes them very hesitant. So when they reach out to us, I just want to emphasize that we are here to believe you. We believe every single contact that reaches out to us, and we're here to listen to find out from them what they need. And then we'll start asking some questions, like I said before, about their situation, just to understand the different kinds of abuse that might be present, any unique barriers they might have, because every situation is different. Everyone is facing something that isn't like another person's. So we want to be understanding of that so that we can assist them if they feel like there are barriers in the way to getting certain kinds of help. And then we use this process too as an educational moment. Not everyone understands that their relationship is abusive, or they feel like, well, I'm not being physically harmed in some way. So it's not abuse. My partner just has an anger problem or they're unhealthy. So we like to provide a lot of education around that and the way that abuse can look. Again, it is different in every relationship, but there are some similarities across the board. So we like to provide a lot of education, especially if people are experiencing very specific types of danger. We want to make sure they have the education around those tactics in order for them to stay as safe as possible while they're in their home. And then the last thing that we do, if somebody would like resources, is that we provide referrals for local resources that can be shelter, that can be financial assistance, legal advocacy, counseling, support groups. Those are all the types of different resources that are available in most locations so that they can connect with them on a more local level.
And I think that's so important, especially for someone who may be fresh out of an abusive relationship. Leaning on that support system, when I think about my own experience, that is what helped me so much on my journey to healing and to overcoming that. I knew I could not heal from this type of trauma on my own. And it was okay for me to say that out loud. It was okay for me to say that I'm not okay and that I need help. So I really want to reemphasize that piece, especially for someone who's, even thinking about leaving an abusive relationship, making that decision on its own. That's one of the hardest things that you can do, but it's also one of the strongest things that you can do. But knowing that there is help out there. There are people out there who will believe you, who have gone through similar experiences, and all you have to do is speak up and ask for help, even if it's just one person, even if it's you just reaching out to the hotline and saying, I don't know where to start. I need you guys to help me.
And I think that's such an important piece too, is that when you're in an abusive relationship, you're dealing with the abuse sometimes on a constant hour by hour, day by day basis, right?
Yeah.
So just trying to survive in that environment can be really overwhelming. Plus, if you're dealing with somebody who's very manipulative or is using a lot of gaslighting, that can really affect your emotions and how you even know how to feel anymore, right? Like you're like, I don't even know how to feel. Like, I don't even know what my emotions are. So for someone who has taken such an amazing, brave and strong step to leave an abusive partner. Now they're in a situation where they have control over their own lives again. They have their own emotions again, but it's really complicated by the abuse that they've been experiencing. So it gets really overwhelming. And a lot of people want to say, oh, I can just do this on my own. And I want to reiterate what you just said. It is okay to say, I can't. This is a lot. It's too much. It's really overwhelming. I would really like for somebody to just hold my hand for a little bit and like help me through this. Like I said, even if it's reaching out to us and talking to us for 30 minutes, for an hour, for 2 hours, just having someone that you can unload some of that emotional burden onto just to free yourself up a little bit. There's no shame in that at all. I think that's an incredibly strong thing for someone to do.
Absolutely. How does the hotline help someone who might not feel ready to leave an abusive situation, but they're still looking for that support?
So we understand that there's various stages that people can be in with regard to their abusive relationship, right? These are really complicated situations, and it takes a lot of courage to leave. I'm sure we've all heard the statistics that on average, it can take someone up to 7 attempts before they're able to leave for good. And that's not an exaggeration. This is not something you just decide one day, hey, you know what? I don't want to do this anymore. And you walk out the door. I wish it were that simple. I really do. I wish that people could just say, no, I'm not doing this anymore and just, pack a bag and leave. But that's not the reality for so many people. Again, even if the relationship's not physically violent, there's a lot of manipulation. There's a lot of emotional abuse that can go on, financial abuse. People have children. There may be custody issues. They might be caring for a parent. They might be struggling with some kind of disability. So it's not as simple as just packing up and leaving. A lot of people who reach out to us aren't ready, and that's okay. We are not here to judge anyone for their situation or where they're at, what stage they're in. We're here to support them. So that's essentially what we're here for. And if they're not ready, then we can still talk about what that could look like for them. What's the safety plan? What are some safe ways that for you to stay safe while you're in your home with your partner if you can't leave? What are some ways that you can take care of your own emotional safety and maybe try to break free a little bit from the power and control that your abusive partner has over you? Because your agency has been stripped. You have no autonomy anymore. It's your partner's. So what are some ways that we can help you get that back, even if it's just a little bit, even if it's just 5 minutes a day? That's something that you can do for yourself. You don't have to leave, because leaving is really one of the most dangerous times in an abusive relationship is when you're leaving and when right after you have left, because what you've done at that point is you've threatened the power and the control that an abusive partner has over you and your life. So it can take some planning. And we're also here to help you with that plan. If that's something that you're thinking about doing, but maybe not ready to do today, okay, what can that look like? What are some steps? What kind of a plan do you have in place? Or if you don't, let's talk about what that could look like so that you can eventually walk out that door if you need to. We honor everyone regardless of where they're at, and we support their wishes.
And everyone's journey is different. Everyone's timeline is different. Just because it happened one way for someone that you may know doesn't mean that you have to follow those same exact steps in order to get the same outcome. I think it's really important for people to know that as well, that it takes you as long as you need to, where you feel comfortable and safe enough to make that decision. And maybe it's going to take for you to do some planning. For me, when I think about my situation, it was a life or death situation. It was in a split moment. I felt God in my presence. I felt the opportunity that this is the moment when I need to leave in order to save my life. And I took it. And then that was really the starting process for me. But this was not a planned thing. I don't think anyone plans to be in an abusive relationship. But for me, it was really like a split-second decision that I made. But knowing that your journey, even if it looks different, that is okay too.
Well, and that's the thing, is that, like I said earlier, a lot of advocates, a lot of people who work in this field have like their own personal experiences, but we don't carry that into our work. So because I left a certain way doesn't mean that that's going to work for somebody else. It's also why this is just a personal thing. I never tell anyone that I understand. Those are not words that I use, just because even if I were in the exact same situation as somebody else, we had the same partner, they were doing the exact same things to me, I'm not going to emotionally react in the same way. It's not going to have the same impact on me, and I'm not going to make the same choices. So it is not fair to a contact for me to say, oh, I understand what you're going through, because the reality is I don't. But I would love for you to tell me what you're dealing with so that we can work together. And I'm here to support you and I'm here to listen.
Just giving that support. That's really the main piece, knowing, like we said before, that you don't have to go through this alone. So I would like for you to talk a little bit about how the hotline ensures that safety and confidentiality of those who call in or chat in, especially if they're in a dangerous situation. Because like you said before, the most dangerous part of being in an abusive relationship is when you do decide to leave or right after. So talk a little bit about the safety and confidentiality that you guys support.
Sure. Regardless of how people reach out, once they are connected with an advocate, the first question we always ask is, are you safe? Are you safe to chat? Are you safe to text? Are you safe to talk? Sometimes people don't necessarily know and they tell us, they're like, I don't know. And so we try to clarify for them what we're asking, which is, if you're on the phone, is there somebody around that can hear you that might get upset or angry to know that you're talking to us? When it's chat or text, it's very similar. Is there someone near you that would get upset or angry if they knew that you were talking with us? With chat or text, we understand that it is something that could be done a little bit more secretly than a phone call. So if someone responds that, oh, my partner's in the same room with chat or text, then the follow-up is, do you, because you know the situation better than I do you feel safe continuing this conversation? If they say yes, then absolutely, we can continue to talk to them. With phones, if they feel like their partner is like in the house, but they're not necessarily right next to them, or, oh, my partner's at work right now, so I have X amount of time. Okay, great. Then we'll continue talking as long as you feel like your situation is safe. If things do become escalated, unfortunately, there are situations where we do have to disconnect for safety, mainly because if you're in a situation where your partner is actively being abusive in that moment, we don't want you trying to talk to us at the same time. It's not because we want to talk to you, it's because you need to focus on your situation and your safety in that moment. We're here. We're always here. So please reach back out again when it's safer. But yeah, for things that have escalated and become violent or just abusive in that moment, we want you to prioritize yourself, because you can always come back to us. And for situations where people are like, oh, my abuser's like in the house, or if I'm texting and they're right next to me, but they don't know I'm talking to you, we always let them know you can hang up at any time. You can click out of the web conversation, you can text stop, and we stop responding immediately, because again, you know the situation. So if you decide that it needs to end immediately, we will assist you with that. Like, we understand that there are situations where you just need to walk away from the conversation at that moment. That's totally fine. That's a reasonable thing for someone to do.
Oh, absolutely. I do have a question. From the time that someone reaches out and they speak to the bot until they get to a live person, is there a certain amount of time in between, of like idle time waiting to get to a live person, that it takes on average, or is it different for every person who calls in or chats in?
It's different every day depending upon the time of day, because we have certain numbers of advocates, because we all have overlapping shifts, and sometimes shifts overlap more than others, or it's just a busy day. October is one of our busier times, so we do experience high contact volume in October, but the reality is we experience high contact volume a lot of the time. So please don't be discouraged if you do reach out and the wait time is a little bit longer than you'd expect. If you can't wait that long, again, please try again later, or at a time when you're safe or you can hold for a while. I wish I
Right.
could give you an exact time, be like, oh, it's 10 minutes exactly. That's so difficult to say. It
Yeah,
really
no,
is.
absolutely. Okay, so can you share any specific examples on how the hotline has helped someone move from crisis to safety?
So we are a confidential service. We're an anonymous service. Like, back with the question about confidentiality of people reaching out, like, we don't save our chat and text conversations. We don't record our phone calls. Pretty soon we're going to have, it's coming, it's not here yet, but pretty soon we're going to have a button on the website that's click to call, so that our number doesn't even show up on your phone bill anymore, because we know that that is something that comes up a lot. We put a lot of safety measures in place to protect the confidentiality of the people who reach out. I was able to pull a situation from my own experience, though, and I can make it sufficiently vague. But I did years ago have someone reach out and they were unsure if their relationship was abusive. They were a little confused. They're like, this doesn't feel right, but I'm not sure. And my friends are saying that this isn't okay. And so I talked to them for quite a while, provided a lot of education around abuse, the abuse that actually was going on in the relationship. They were very receptive to it and they had the time. So we were able to explore a few different options for what moving forward could look like for them, whether that was staying in the relationship or leaving because they were very unsure. And this was in the evening time because I worked nights then. And a few days later, I got an email from another advocate and they said, hey, such and such reached out again today, said they spoke to you and wanted to come back into the hotline and let me know specifically that they had gone with one of the plans that we had talked about and they were able to leave and they were in a place that was safe and they just wanted to let me know that they were safe and they were okay.
That's amazing.
That is very rare. That is not something that happens on the regular. That's why it kind of sticks in my head because it was someone that I knew I had talked to and they were kind enough to reach back out and let me know that, they were okay. But a lot of the time, the nature of our services, we talk to people and we don't necessarily know what happens in their situation. We obviously always hope for the best for them and that they're able to do things to keep themselves safe and move forward and able to get away from abuse. But we don't always know. But we also have people that reach out at multiple points along their journey too. So they might have reached out a year ago and now they're at a different point in their relationship and they can move forward with a different part of the plan and now they just need a little assistance. So we can work with them on what that next step from that point is. Or they might call back later when they're like, oh, I'm ready to leave now. So what does that look like? Okay, we can absolutely talk about what that looks like. So we do have people who come back, but because, like I said, because of the confidentiality of our service, we don't know like a specific person. Plus, they also have the option of using an alias. They don't have to give us our real name at all or put in a fake fake city and state. That's fine. We do sometimes have people who come in years later and will let us know, hey, I reached out 10 years ago and I just wanted to let you all know that I'm doing amazing and I'm writing this book or I'm involved with this organization or I started my own nonprofit. I mean, these really amazing stories from people that are just really heartwarming when, we don't get a lot of follow up.
Yeah, yeah. No, for sure. I'm sure that warms your heart when you hear stories like that and keeps you going, right?
Yeah.
That's the whole purpose behind wanting to help and being that support system to know that you are able to get out on the other side, no matter what that looks like for you. I would love for you to give a little bit of education, especially for people who might have that mindset of like that person that you dealt with that wasn't really sure if they were in an abusive relationship. What would you say are some red flags or warning signs that someone should look out for if they think they are in an abusive relationship, no matter what that looks like?
So one thing I like to tell people when they come in and they're like, I'm unsure, my friend said that this is kind of hinky or this doesn't feel right to me is, well, let's talk about some things that you've noticed or that other people have noticed or that just don't feel right to you. Like, what are those things, right? And ultimately, abuse is about power and control. So what we're looking out for are ways in which what someone's partner is trying to take control over their life, over the relationship, asserts power over them. It could be so many different things because abuse comes in a number of different forms, but it could be as simple as, oh, all of a sudden we get into an argument and he gets really loud and he yells and calls me names and puts me down. Or, oh, I was just scrolling on Instagram and my partner was looking over my shoulder and commenting on everything that I liked. On the digital stuff, we see that a lot these days is, oh, my partner doesn't like that I'm friends with people of the opposite gender. So they want me to unfriend all these people or get rid of my social media completely. Or it's even like really subtle. I'm going to go hang out with my friends and my partner makes me feel guilty for leaving. And so now I feel like I have to stay at home. And that's when we start to see like that isolation, right? From friends and
Mm-hmm.
family. Like, oh, why can't you stay and spend time with me? It's monopolizing of a person's time, of their energy, of their attention those are the kinds of things that we're looking for. A lot of the time, it's really not the physical violence. It's these more subtle digital financial, oh, my partner wants to control all the bills. So he's good with money. She's good with money. So they just take the checks and they have control of the accounts and pay all the bills. So we're taken care of. And those things start to add up because if you find one or two, a lot of times when you start really asking about what the relationship looks like, you start to find more and more. And that's when we can pretty confidently tell someone, hey, your relationship is abusive. These behaviors are not okay. This is not how healthy partners treat you. This is not how someone who's supposed to love you treats you. Love is an abuse. It's not control.
And I appreciate you for sharing that because I think there is so much of that stigma that people who have not experienced it or don't really know about domestic violence, it can only look one certain way in their minds. Like for me, before I ever knew what domestic violence was, I was very naive to it. I was very much what you see in the movies, and it's like glorified, and it's like, oh, she ends up in the hospital. She has a broken nose. She has a bloody lip. But there's so much more nuanced type of abuse that a lot of the times we don't even realize until we're months, years, decades into the relationship. And we're just like, oh my God, I've been in an abusive relationship this entire time. When I think about my sister, she's gone public with this, so I'm comfortable with sharing it, but she was in an emotionally abusive marriage for the entirety of it. Never once did he lay a hand on her, but he was very manipulative and just emotionally abused her the entire time. And it took her over a decade to realize that and to finally walk away. So I appreciate you for sharing that there is so many more types of abuse than just one certain type that we think of.
And I think like what you just said is so key because what we see generally as a population is what's on TV, right? It's whatever the court case is of the moment. It's whatever's on SVU. Guilty. I watch SVU a lot, but it's like, it's those situations, right?
Yep. Yep.
It's whatever this Lifetime movie of the week, like whatever they're showing. What we don't see in media and what I wish we saw more of are this more nuanced kind of manipulation, the stuff that starts really small. The relationship is amazing for a year. What about that love bombing that suddenly is guilt and blame and manipulation and name calling and all these things? Or if it starts like really, really small, it's like one little thing and you're like, oh, they were having an off day. It's dismissed, right? And then it just builds a little bit at a time until the next thing you know, it's like, I don't have control of my bank accounts. And my partner has the code to my phone and they know exactly what I'm doing online all the time. Or, they're controlling the thermostat while they're out of the home and I don't know what the passcode is. Or I've been forced to leave my job to be a stay-at-home. A lot of times it's to stay at home and take care of children because it seems like a good idea. And abusers are so skilled at this kind of manipulation to make you think, oh yeah, no, that was a good idea in order for you to give up your rights, to give up your autonomy. And it starts so small. You don't always see it happening until, like you said, it could be decades later. And it's like, what happened?
Yep. So many good nuggets that you're giving the audience. I could talk to you all day because there's just so many more things. Yeah, and I just appreciate the work that you're doing to educate and help and support people. I would love for you to give a little bit of what we can do as a community to raise awareness and to be better allies to those who are impacted by domestic violence.
I think it all starts on the individual level. If you know somebody who is in an abusive relationship, who is disclosed to you, or you suspect that maybe things aren't quite right, please be a person that is open and non-judgmental, that can be a support system. A support system of one is still a support system. Please be that person that another person can go to when they need support. Please don't judge them. This is a process that can take a really long time to get out of. It's one that's very complicated. There are a lot of complex emotions. People don't always know even how to process it in the moment. But having an ear, having someone they can talk to just to kind of get it off their chest so they're not carrying it around all the time, that I think is so crucial. So if anyone out there does know somebody that is being hurt in their relationship, if you could be that ear for them, be a hand for them to hold, that goes so far for them. I get a little I'm thinking about it, right?
Yeah.
Because we need more people to do that. Outside of like an individual level, local resources are run with very tight budget and a lot of their staff is volunteer. So find the agencies in your area, connect with a domestic violence agency that's near you. We have our entire database, the National Domestic Violence Hotline, at our website, thehotline.org, has our entire database of every agency that we use to refer people to online on our website. So you can search by your city to see what might be near you and just reach out to those agencies, those organizations. What are some ways that you're looking for help? You might not have to commit to being a volunteer necessarily for 3 days a month or whatever. Get a group of friends together, get a group of coworkers together and commit to one day. Go in, do 8 hours for some things that they might need. Donate. A lot of shelters have people that are coming in with nothing. Like in your situation, they're having to flee very life-threatening situations, a lot of times with children, with nothing but what they're wearing on their backs. So shelters a lot of times need things like diapers and wipes and toiletries. So find out what your local organization needs and donate. If you can't donate time, donate some goods that might be helpful for the people that are escaping or they're seeking out services.
Last thing I want to ask you before we wrap up the conversation, what advice would you give to someone who's listening or watching? They're unsure if they should reach out to the hotline, but they have feelings of being scared or confused in their relationship. What is a piece of advice you would tell them?
Reach out, pick up the phone. Talking's not for everyone. So if the phone makes you uncomfortable, send us a text, reach out via chat. I'm here. We're here. Every advocate feels as strongly about this as I do. We want to connect with you. We want to talk to you. We want to hear what you're going through, and we want to support you in the ways that you feel you need in that moment. It is scary to reach out. We're strangers. You don't know us, but we don't know you. So that a lot of times that anonymity can help people be a little bit more open with their story and about what they're going through. But please try. It is intimidating, but we want to hear from you. We really do. We want to answer your questions. If you're unsure, if you're confused, that's okay too. We do a lot of healthy relationship education as well for people who aren't necessarily in abusive relationships, but things just aren't quite healthy. So we can talk to you about things like trust and boundaries and respect and equality in your relationship, even if it's not abusive. And then if it is, again, we have a lot of information. We all have a lot of training. There's a lot of education we can provide. And then we want to put those next decisions in your hands so that you, the individual, feel empowered to do what you think is going to be best for you in your life. That's what we want to do. We want to help lift you up when somebody else is out there tearing you down.
I love this conversation so much. I'm so sad that we're at the end, but Melissa, again, I just appreciate you so much. And thank you again to the hotline for this collaboration. I know this is going to help so many people get a more behind the scenes look of what the hotline provides. I would love for you to plug in how we can follow, how we can reach out to you, and any last piece of advice that you want to leave the audience with.
Like I said, our resources are available online. If somebody is seeking resources in their area, that is something that also is available 24/7 if you are just not quite ready to reach out. But if I leave you with anything, I want to leave you with this. There are people, there are so many of us that work here that are committed to helping to end domestic violence as much as we can, but also supporting those who feel like they might not have any support. You truly are not alone. We are here for you. There is no other reason but to support those who are struggling in their relationship, who have questions. It doesn't even have to be your relationship. If you have a friend or a family member that you're concerned about, reach out. We can talk about what that looks like or different ways that you can assist them. It doesn't have to be your relationship necessarily. So that goes for friends and family too. So yeah, we're here and we do really want to hear from you.
Yes, absolutely. I'm going to link all of the resources in the show notes for you guys to check out. Once again, Melissa, thank you so much. It has been a pleasure to talk to you, and thank you for what you're doing because you are literally saving lives with the work that you do. So I appreciate you.
Well, thank you so much. This was absolutely amazing to be here. I really appreciate you having me, having us speak on what we do, especially during Domestic Violence Awareness Month. So it's been such a joy to be here.
Thank you.
Thank you.